the next thing that we'll listen here, it's a panel. And the name of the panel is Why Don't You Trust Scrum? I bet that you heard about Scrum. Are you in a team that is doing Scrum? Yes. Okay. Somebody very enthusiastic about this. So what will happen is there will be a conversation about is Scrum still relevant these days? And I think it's very nice that we will hear from two people who are deeply involved in developing software using Scrum. And I'm talking about Artur Kerpician, who is a senior PHP developer. He has 16 years experience in development at EMAG. And Guy Duncan, who is CTO at PayU. Guy is focused technology leader who has lead product development, strategy, operation, and customer services. And they will talk about why don't you trust Scrum. So, Guy and Artur. They are coming, no worries.
Yeah.
Guy and Artur.
Thanks.
Let's applaud.
Hello.
Thank you.
All right. We've got a short presentation, right? On we're going to do this collaboratively, right? We'd like to go through the presentation, kind of take you through some thoughts, some context, and then we'd like to open it up for question and answer. Okay? So first of all, I'm Guy Duncan. I'm the global CTO for the PayU group. I've been doing software development for about 25 years. I've been working in XP since 2003. I've been working in large-scale distributed Scrum since 2008. Love technology, love building new products and technology. I've managed teams as large as 1,800 people, 11 countries, with 120-plus Scrum teams. I know a lot about distributed Scrum, what works and what doesn't. And I've worked with Agile thought leaders like Craig Larman, Luke Holman, and Greg Hutchins, just to name a few. This is our footprint globally at PayU, and these are the customers in the countries that we serve, right, with our technology. So we're a global country. We're active in about 18 countries globally. First myth about Scrum, that Scrum is good for small teams, but it can't scale. I can tell you 100% that Scrum will scale. 20 years ago, right, when it was basically really being incubated in the late 90s, it didn't really scale all that well. It really scales well today. Organization leaders, right, in order for it to scale really well, Scrum really needs to be aligned with the entire organization. If you just have a little pocket, one development team, and they're just doing Scrum or Agile unto themselves, it really, really doesn't scale. So you need the leadership, you need everyone to buy into the concept about Scrum and Agile and why it's important. And then organizations that have a one-to-one relationship or one product manager, one Scrum Master, right, and one team, that usually doesn't scale very well. That works really well on a small scale, but when you talk about multi-site, multiple teams, it usually breaks down. And then the last one is that you need really, really good talent. The more you scale Agile and Scrum, the better talent you need, particularly on the product side and particularly on the leadership side.
Yeah, I want to continue on this idea about how you approach Scrum in a big team. Okay, we at EMAG are about 350 developers, okay, for a whole bunch of applications. How do you approach Scrum and change the whole organization philosophy to embrace Scrum, to correctly implement it? And from my experience, not only in EMAG, I recommend doing a piloting program. Choose your best team. Choose the people you trust, who know, you know they are committed to deliver, okay? And start with this small team, okay? And then watch out for the burnout chart, okay? Improve the burnout chart, and then start moving towards other teams and hopefully to the entire organization. But as Guy said, the whole business should embrace Scrum and understand the true meaning of Scrum, and understand that Agile, which Scrum is part of, is not about doing things very fast, okay? Do it carefully, and you'll have great results, okay?
Cool, great. So myth number 2, all right. Scrum is good for time and materials, but not fixed bid. So this is a really important point. There's a real misconception about Scrum that it's not exact, that you can't find out how long things take, and you can't find out when product will ship. I really want to emphasize, when I was the global CTO at Valtech, we use Scrum to provide fixed bid deliverables using a Scrum methodology, all right? It works really well. A matter of fact, it works significantly better than Waterfall in regards to that, right? Second point, key to the success of large-scale Scrum is that you have to have a clear product vision. What Scrum does is it really identifies the gaps in the organization where you don't have answers. And you typically with Scrum, you find that you have the gaps on product. You have the gaps associated with the product vision or the business vision. It just simply exposes that. It can't solve for that, but it certainly can expose that weakness. And then the last point is that, this is on the empirical evidence of Scrum and Agile, is that you can use things like complexity point estimation, right? And structured comprehensive reviews, and the concept called a retrospection after each sprint to adjust what you're delivering, right? So iteratively, you're able to take the data out of each sprint, look at that data, and then provide adjustment as you move forward. Having that empirical data gives you true insight. You mentioned about a burn down. If you've got a burn down chart, that's providing you empirical data about your velocity and your success of burning stories to complete that sprint. That data is invaluable because it provides you insight on the success or failure of that sprint. Anything you want to say on this myth?
Yeah, you went somehow on the advantages ground of Scrum.
Right.
Yeah, on this myth number 2. Well, the first thing, Scrum is an agile framework. It's not a methodology. Okay, it's a framework. It's a lightweight framework, meaning that all the events, all the paperwork, sort of, is kept to a minimum. Okay, this time that the development team, the Scrum Master, the product owner must spend on bureaucracy, okay, and paperwork is kept to a minimum. That's why Scrum is a lightweight framework of Agile. But what is Agile? Okay, as I said, it's not about doing things in a fast pace. Okay, like this. Most of you probably had an interview in the last 2 or 3 years. Okay, applied for a job. You saw that the job requirements was about have you practicing Agile? Have you practiced Scrum before? Well, everybody's asking for it, but are they true about this requirement, or is it just because it's cool and it attracts developers?
Great. Yeah. Cool. Great. Myth 3. We got one more myth. I'm sorry, one more after this. So we got 4 that we're going to talk about. First of all, myth 3, Scrum will solve all your problems, but more importantly, Scrum is evolving. So this is really, really important. There's often times where organizations will embark upon Scrum or Agile methodologies because they've got a problem with application development, or they've got a problem with not having enough speed, or they've got a time to market consideration. Scrum really is not designed to solve those problems. Scrum is designed to basically take you to another level in terms of precision in regards to the marketplace, right? And no matter how well you practice Scrum, it doesn't matter that team itself, they could be the best people in the world, but if around them they're not getting the support in order to move forward with those ideas, they will not be successful, okay? And you need that, again, that whole organizational acceptance in terms of what's happening with Scrum. I like to refer to it as, there's a lot of times in organizations where you'll go in and there's a development team, one development team or 3 or 4 that might be doing Scrum and Agile, but then they're not doing it everywhere else. And you kind of end up with this Agile, I call it like an Agile ghetto, right? It's this little back door where, you know, if the product people need something fast and they need to really get something delivered, go talk to the Agile guys because they'll give it for you, right? And they can get it, and you barter, and you do this black ops in the dark alley, right? And you get the delivery. So that's kind of what happens, but that's not healthy, right? It's much better when the whole organization embraces it. It really makes visible the problems, and I think the clearest problems it makes is lack of discipline in terms of development standards, and also lack of vision in terms of product. Those are two areas where it typically really identifies those problems. And then, again, there's a lot of Scrum Agile, and there's probably some Scrum Agile coaches in the audience, and I generally don't like coaches because they can be Scrum and Agile Nazis, right? They're very dictatorial about following it to the letter. Scrum is not that. It's a lightweight management framework, as you said very accurately, and it needs to be adapted for the organization that it's implemented in, right? There's not a credo, there's not a single method of doing Scrum and Agile in one way. It needs to be morphed and fixed and tuned for the environment and the product and the environment in which it's used.
Yeah, I was thinking, how can you turn a development team into a Scrum team, okay? They know nothing about Scrum. The thing is, don't put juniors, okay, in a Scrum team, in a new Scrum team. It won't work, for sure, okay? The other roles, the Scrum Master is a key role. It's a master-servant role. It has to be properly trained, certified to do this job, and to he's the glue that keeps this the Scrum team together. Okay, train the product owner to do his work not as a boss, as a partner for the development team, and on the other way, train the development team to act like a supplier for the product owner, because he's the client after all.
Great. And then myth 4 is agile processes are less disciplined and structured than Waterfall. So the first thing that everyone forgets about Agile and Scrum, but Scrum in particular, is that Scrum is an empirical software development framework, right, to provide iterative data on the success and failure of a sprint. If there's one thing that I would ask for you to remember about Scrum and Agile from the talk that we're giving today, it's number 1 on this myth, right? It is really, truly an empirical methodology to give you data on the success or failure of a sprint. Scrum is based on an empirical process control model. It is a management control framework for delivering high-quality software and product, right? And then last, as a remedy for the shortcomings, right, in traditional models, i.e., the fact that the software industry over the last 20 years has completely failed in delivering high-quality software on time and on budget, right, using Waterfall. This has really, really helped in terms of that. And, you know, XP, Scrum, all of these are really good methodologies. And the practitioners, in terms of those methodologies, it continues to evolve and change. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, you mentioned Waterfall. Okay, so what happens actually in a Waterfall approach? You plan, you build, you test, you review, and you deploy, okay? In one huge step. I mean, it can take from 6 months to 1 year or more. You usually don't go back from a testing stage to the planning. I mean, if you reach testing, that's it. You better do it right in the first place, because it's damn heavy hard to get back there. I was thinking about a scenario, okay, purely science fictional. Let's say you have a great idea, okay? You're going to build a mind-reading application that will blow everybody's minds, okay? But you decide to approach it in a waterfall process, okay? So you plan the release after 1 year. Okay, you'll have 5 months for planning and 7 months for development. Along the way, after 5 months of planning, you open the newspaper and read the biggest headline there is, and that headline says, well, Google launches today the Mind Blocker, the application that will prevent everybody from reading your mind. Get it now on Google Play and App Store, okay, before someone else will read your mind. Okay, this is a total failure, because you didn't see it coming. You planned for on long term, 1 year, and as we know, Google moves fast. and probably do Scrum. Actually, I'm sure they do.
So that's our presentation. We've got about 25 minutes. We'd like to open it up for questions and answers. So anybody have a question? There's one right here.
Hi. So one question. So one question that I have is how do you manage product management expectation to deliver them a fixed schedule for the features that you plan in Scrum? Usually there's a tendency to say we're agile, we cannot commit on a date.
So I'll give you my approach and then you can take a stab at it. So my approach is to enter into a what I would call piccolo, right? I would like to go into a small phase and I would like to commit to a certain number of iterations, maybe 6 sprints, maybe 4 sprints, with a very small team that's one of your better teams, and to have them sit and be co-located with the product people, and to really, out of that, to do a couple really key things. One is to establish the domain model, right? Secondarily would be to extenuate and groom and basically put out all of the stories, right? The third thing would be actually to code, some code associated with those deliverables, right? A wireframe, a working prototype, the data model, you know, all the corresponding technical deliverables. And then after that, to have a comprehensive retrospection with architects, with stakeholders within the business, maybe the CTO, those type of folks, to review those deliverables. And to really look at those deliverables succinctly and to actually look at the data that comes out of those and to use that data to estimate the delivery of that product. Again, t-shirt sizing and all of that is an extremely effective, good method, but you should do that, you should use those techniques within a confined box. I like to call that a chunk of work, right? So you basically carve out that chunk and then you have a retrospection at that end that's very comprehensive to review those deliverables, to determine the velocity and to determine the level of effort subsequent to that to deliver on time and within those market conditions. After you have, now if you basically say right away, let's go ahead and deploy 6 teams, you might succeed, but you're probably going to fail. It's better to start small, have those very defined deliverables, get your best people, like a tiger team together to basically do that, and then after they basically have worked for 4 to 6 sprints, then look at it. Now, if you've got a different business problem where you need to deliver in like 3 weeks, well then you got a different problem. But that would be the approach that I would take to answer that.
Yeah, if the question is about business deadlines, I'll say, okay, I'll look at the team velocity, okay, in the first place. And I see they're burning about 100 story points per sprint, 2x sprints, okay? The development team doesn't need to know about the business deadline. Their deadline is the end of the sprint. I mean, you must fit in that sprint as many stories that the development team can handle. And you have a background for that team, okay?
Yep.
This is my...
Yep. And then my last point is that at some point in the product development cycle using Scrum and Agile, it is okay to ask for what I call the golden triangle. And the golden triangle is where you actually commit on scope, cost, and time. Now you can't ask for that initially. If you've got a product idea, like your product idea, you want to create a system that can read people's minds. Well, you cannot define those 3 variables today. What you want to do is use Scrum as an empirical methodology to get the data so that you can provide that answer, right? Does that make sense?
Okay, we have another question there.
Okay.
Okay, regarding working with multiple teams on the same project, and the teams are in different geographical locations, how do you split the work? Do all the teams, can all the teams work on the same code, or do we split them on different modules or services?
So the question is teams that are not co-located.
Yes.
So you've got distributed Scrum.
Yes,
okay.
Correctly, on the same product.
So first of all, my first advice to everyone in this room is if you can co-locate product and tech together in your development center by product line, do it. Don't do distributed Scrum, right? Distributed Scrum is taking the training wheels off. It's getting the Ducati right? The high-end Ducati, and it's driving down at 200 kilometers an hour. Distributed Scrum is really difficult. But if you have to do it, like a lot of us have to do it anyway, there's some things, some patterns that I think really help a lot. One is internal open source, right? That's really good. In other words, the idea is that the teams that are working together that are not co-located, that you have a really good continuous integration, continuous deployment pipeline, right? And that you have a sense of shared code, and you're running metrics out of that shared code in terms of your CI and your CD pipeline. That's common. If you have somebody over in this site and you've got someone else at this site, you should be using the same CI and the CD. The cloud really gives you some great benefits there now. You can basically combine those sites. The second point is the product people need to move back and forth between both locations. The product people can't just sit in one location. They need to invest equally with the other location. And if there's 3 locations, they need to split their time between 3. The other concept is that if you really need to scale, the concept that I really like is Craig Larman's. Craig Larman talks about how to distribute Scrum and Agile. He's probably the best thinker on that subject. And he talks about a model of a product owner, product manager, and then underneath it, to distribute it at all locations, an area product owner or an area product manager. And what happens is that they end up being the proxy, so to speak, for the product owner. They're still externally focused, but that allows you to distribute it very nicely. And if you do these techniques, you can do it. The other thing that's really important is stick with a single backlog. Just because you have another location doesn't mean you should break the backlog and have 2 backlogs. Stick with one backlog. So a tool like Jira or some version 1 or Rally, which lets you basically manage that single backlog with multiple views, irrespective of location, will help a lot.
Yeah, I can share my my experience at EMAG because we're doing distributed Scrum. We're in Bucharest, Iași, and Craiova, so we have teams scattered all over the country. How do we do it? Well, not very well at this time, okay? But we're improving. Each team now has a Scrum Master, which wasn't happening until 2 months ago. We're working on the same application. I mean, in EMAG there are about 15, 20 applications. I lost count. But multiple teams work on the same application, okay? On the same code base, which is getting harder and harder, okay? By this application increase in complexity. So imagine a team in Iași doing some stuff on an interface or, I don't know, a new feature, which affects the work done by the team in Bucharest, which happens, I mean, nowadays, as we speak, okay? But we're trying to improve things, implementing microservices, okay? We're having a common backlog in Jira, as you mentioned, with distinct sprints, okay? But a common backlog.
Okay, cool.
Okay, other questions? Let's take one from that side and then we've
got one back here.
Or
question back there.
Hello? Okay. So my question is based on my let's say previous experience with Agile, in the sense that a lot of projects or maybe project managers, let's say, have pretend Agile teams, in the sense that let's say they do stand up and they say, okay, we are Agile. We are not fully Agile, but we'll get there at one point. And as a Scrum Master, basically you're unable to deliver on the promises of Agile. So if you come back to the manager and say it's not possible, we're not actually Agile, then you get pushed back in the sense that, okay, don't worry, we'll get there. So because it seems like you have a bias, you're not willing to do your work. So is there, like, I don't know, a checkbox saying you're not Agile unless you do A, B, C? Because you're saying it's a framework, and they come back and say, okay, we don't have a product owner that will help you, but we'll get there. And I think there are some basic things that you need in order for you to become successful. Otherwise, okay, it can be improved, but you'll never be able to improve unless you have the minimum requirements, I'd say.
Yeah, so the question is about kind of patterns where you see what I call fragile, not agile, where you see organizations using like project managers, and they do a daily stand-up, and they basically do the rituals of Scrum and Agile, and they hold this card up and they say, yeah, we're we're agile, and they're really not agile. So my recommendation to you is do it for real. If the organization that you're working with or collaborating with, just call a spade a spade. You know, if you go to McDonald's and you eat at McDonald's and then you want to say to somebody, hey, McDonald's is a Michelin 3-star restaurant, you're lying. And it's the same thing with those type of patterns. It's really not Scrum and Agile. But it's okay. I mean, if there's a plan to kind of evolve, that's a good plan. Project managers are pretty controversial in Agile and Scrum. There's some Scrum methodologists like Craig Larman who say throw them out of the organization. You don't need them, right? There's that pattern. There's some people like myself where I believe in the shape of projects, and I do believe that project managers can represent and participate in regards to the things that are outside of Scrum and Agile, like customer service, HR, right? Governance functions, right? So I think there is a role for that. But my advice to you is to really be clear about what Scrum and Agile is, see if you can get good coaching, tune the organizational design, and align at the top. If the top is not aligned with the vision of the benefits of what Scrum and Agile can provide, it won't happen. It won't happen within the organization.
Yeah, well, the Scrum implementation in the company is the hardest thing, okay? The whole management should agree that they have to let go, okay? And let the development team make the decisions, how they're gonna do it, what they know, and how they'll improve the product. Okay, so they have to take a step back. It's hard. It's hard for the management. I saw the other day a YouTube video about Facebook doing Scrum. So did the title said, okay? They were doing an iterative process, okay, with the project manager, with the business analyst, with the front-end designer, the back-end, and a whole user profile team. But you can see from that video that they're not actually doing Scrum. They're doing something like Frumware, okay? It's successful. I mean, I'm not doubting Facebook's success, but that's not Scrum. Okay.
Right. Yep.
Hi.
Hi.
Ooh, it works. So, Scrum fits everywhere. Is it true or not? And if not, when to be aware of it and what's the alternative? Thanks.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question. You said Scrum is everywhere?
Scrum fits everywhere.
No, Scrum does not fit everywhere. So there's multiple Agile frameworks. As an example, in organizations that are infrastructure focused, that are basically doing production support, Kanban's probably a heck of a lot better, right? In certain product organizations, like I worked for a very, very good advanced product organization, and we basically own the entire tech stack, right? So we had to basically roll our own motherboards, our own chips. We built the software, we did the distribution, the whole life cycle. We had responsibility for that. And we had to conform to basically 6.9, 6 Sigma, 1 error in 10 million for the hardware and the software. Really brutally hard standard. What we discovered was Scrum just didn't work for that. So we used a modified version of XP, right? So I think that there's a lot of flavors of Agile and Scrum, and there's some really cool stuff going on, and you should not be, you know, again, I hate to use this word, but you shouldn't be religious about it. You should really look at the practices and look at what's good, look at what's bad. You should exchange, you should figure out what's good for you. But whatever you choose to do it with earnest, right? Do it with full passion and commitment that you're always going to get better, right? So.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to tell you a story by Jeff Sutherland, one of the fathers of Scrum, okay, at one TED Talk. He was a pilot, a fighter pilot. He was in the Vietnam War. So he was entering the Vietnam airspace, and he constantly was going into evasive maneuvers, okay? Because following the flight plan, the initial flight plan, was a certain crash, okay? going to be shut down. So he was constantly maneuvering around the anti-aircraft missiles. Okay, once he locked the target, okay, and dropped the bombs or whatever he was having there, he was going back into the same maneuvers. So that experience, which is harsh by all means, had somehow driven him to develop Scrum and improve it. Okay, so Scrum, yeah, you can do it, apply it on your personal life at some point.
I have a question. How can we effectively manage security in Scrum? What kind of methodologies or process should be implemented in Scrum? I hope both of you are from payment gateways or dealing with online payment. How you are improving the security in the Scrum?
Yeah, so the question is how can you use Scrum to basically improve security? Well, first of all, it's a contextual management framework. How we do it, right, we run payments, so we conform to PCI and DSS standards, and we also we're moving some of our platforms, we haven't moved all of them, we're moving to ISO 27001. Additionally, we really are trying to incubate and move forward with concepts around DevOps, where DevOps lives on the teams themselves, so the teams themselves will remediate and fix the issues as they arise from production, as opposed to the pattern where you typically see where you create a DevOps organization, which is a production support organization, that's isolated. What we're trying to do is make that very lean and basically push those items to the teams themselves for production support. So those are some things that you can do, and you can treat security as, of course, a #1 item in the backlog that should be addressed immediately, but it also goes back to control of your code, continuous integration, continuous deployment. If you have a monolithic code base that's incredibly difficult for you to basically deploy, where you have to take a downtime in order to deploy the code base, that's highly problematic. So moving to patterns where you use toggles, moving to patterns where you use microservices, moving to patterns where you basically can do continuous integration, continuous deployment, and zero downtime. I'm a huge fan of Martin Fowler's pattern around blue-green for production systems to get high availability. These are all things that basically make the platform and the technology more responsive, so you can deploy hot fixes and fix security. So.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure if the security issue is a real issue in Scrum. I think it's more about securing the information over.
Scrum, there is not enough documentation available. So, consider a scenario: a developer implement a backdoor code in the code, and he push into the production, and nobody checks, and he might encoder it, or the scanner, static analysis or dynamic analysis couldn't find it. So I don't know, there is no proper documentation, there is no one responsible for in the Scrum for the security or some issue. If some security things happen, who is responsible, who is accountable for it, or anything like that?
Well, the Scrum Master. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, the product and the code, right? That's the responsibility of the team.
Yeah.
So all the team should ultimately take responsibility for that, right?
And
one question.
Yep.
Hi. You strongly recommended to start using Scrum with your very best development team and not with juniors. Why is that?
No, sorry.
I didn't get
louder.
it.
Sorry. You strongly recommended to start using Scrum with your very best development team and not with juniors. Why?
Because
why choose Scrum as a methodology?
No.
Why not using with juniors? But
why
with
not?
your
Why
very
use juniors?
best development team.
Don't start with juniors. Okay? A Scrum team must be cross-functional. Every team member should be able to do front end, back end, testing, quality assurance, and so on, deploying all the stuff. I mean, there's no roles like a business analyst. Okay, sorry if any of you are business analysts or project managers. Okay, there's no role like this in Scrum. I mean, Scrum is simple, so it's simple, but this is the problem. Okay, because it's hard to implement it. In Scrum, you have only the development team, which is cross-functional and must be well-trained, well-prepared, able to do all the things that I talked earlier, you have the Scrum Master and the Product Owner. That's all. So any junior member in the development team will somehow bring the whole Zen factor, okay, down in the team.
Yeah. And then I would add that in Scrum and Agile, right, the ultimate place that you want to get to is full feature-based teams, meaning that every team member is multi-striped, multi-disciplined, able to code on anything, right, within the stack. So what that means is what you said. I mean, you really don't have segregated roles. You don't have QA, you don't have development, you don't have project management, all of that. You don't have BA. The whole team works on that. That's Nirvana. That's the Nirvana team. Now, evolutionary, we all need to take steps to get there. If you start with a really green team, they might even be talented and enthusiastic, and you say, we want you to do full Scrum, it's probably not going to go very well. That's my experience. And I've literally managed hundreds of people's multiple sites, and I've tried to inject even, super high-performing teams, the best of the best of new college grads, and I've tried to incubate that on those teams, and it just doesn't turn out very well. I agree with you either need to blend the team with some talent, but it's the best approach is to go get people that have 5+ years of experience, really experienced. They've been there, they've done that, they know what doesn't work, and really get those high-performing teams. So, and that creates a problem, right? Because everybody wants those people, right?
Okay, let's take one last quick question.
One more question?
One last quick question.
Okay.
That's there.
Yeah.
Okay. No. Hello. If Scrum needs to evolve.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. If Scrum needs to evolve, how should evolve to fit the new DevOps paradigm?
How should Scrum evolve to handle DevOps? Is that the question?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, first of all, the DevOps movement itself is extremely exciting. It's really, it's phenomenal. And for those who don't know what DevOps is, read the book, The Phoenix Project, right? It's a great book, great read. It's basically a lean-based approach to software development that basically inherently builds quality into it. How we coach DevOps is DevOps needs to be on the teams. So what you do is you take a team and you analyze the production defects and you allocate a percentage per sprint, right, as a buffer to deal with the DevOps issues that you need to. The teams themselves need to take responsibility for CI and CD. They need to take responsibility for as much automation, and the teams themselves should learn Puppet, right, to basically do orchestration. Containers, there's a session here today on containers, go to that. Containers are freaking awesome because you can containerize your environment and then you can move that on a CI/CD and a CD pipeline. I think DevOps is the coolest thing that's happened to Agile and Scrum in, last couple years.
Okay.
I'm sorry? Yeah, so he said, should you enlarge the team a little bit to do it? Maybe for a short period of time. In other words, inoculate a couple DevOps production support engineers with a team for a series of sprints, but then you should move the team size down. Because Scrum and Agile, I don't think you should ever move above 6 people. I think you should try to keep it. And even smaller, I think they're just more effective. So, great question though. Great question.
Okay.
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 All right.
Thank you, Arthur and Guy.